Hey guys, tonight we're cramming ourselves into something even tighter than your inbox on a Monday morning. A Roman insula. Think apartment living, ancient Rome style. No elevators, no insulation, no peace. These buildings were tall, flammable, and built with the structural integrity of a wet lasagna. So before you settle in, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. Somehow, it's always 2:41 a.m. for this channel. Now, dim those lights, switch on a fan for that soft background hum, grab your coziest blanket, and maybe tuck your feet in because your upstairs neighbor is about to drop a jug of olive oil through the floorboards. Have you ever wondered what it felt like to live 4 stories above a Roman bakery, with smoke in your lungs and rats in your breakfast? What if your toilet was literally a hole over the street? Would you survive on fermented fish sauce and yesterday's lentils? Could you live without privacy, hot water, or reliable stairs? Would you risk your life every night just to boil cabbage over a clay fire? Or would you be the person yelling at your neighbor to stop singing poetry at 3 a.m. through the wall? Well, no more wondering. Congratulations. You've just woken up in the year 125 CE. You're on the 3rd floor of an insula in the Subura district of Rome. It's hot, it smells like pickled regret, and someone downstairs is yelling about stolen laundry. Your ceiling leaks, your kitchen is technically a box with a candle, and your neighbor's parrot won't stop quoting Cicero. Good luck. Congratulations. You live in an ancient Roman high-rise. That sounds impressive, until you realize your walls are made of plastered sticks and your floor creaks like it's begging for mercy. The landlord? Missing. The roof? Optional. And fire? Oh, it's not if it's when. Welcome to the Insula, Rome's solution to urban housing. Tall, narrow, overcrowded, and so structurally questionable that modern building inspectors would cry just looking at one. These weren't elegant townhouses or marble villas. These were the original, affordable housing, slapped together quickly to meet the booming city's growing demand. And by slapped together, I mean probably with actual slaps. Bricks, wooden beams, cheap concrete, and pure hope. Your building might be 5 stories tall. Maybe 6 if the architect was feeling particularly reckless that week. If you live on the ground floor, congratulations. You are practically Roman royalty. Your walls are made of real stone, you don't have to hike up narrow stairs, and you're slightly less likely to die in a building collapse. But if you're above the 2nd floor, you're basically camping in the sky. Let's talk about those upper floors. They're made with cheaper materials to save money. Wood, mud bricks, and plaster that flakes like a bad sunburn. Your walls wiggle slightly when the wind blows. Your floorboards bend when your neighbor breathes too hard. If someone drops a loaf of bread 2 floors up, you feel it. You start learning to tell time by counting how many things fall through your ceiling per hour. And then there's the stairwell. A charming spiral of doom. Narrow, dark, and built at an angle that makes you question both gravity and Roman engineering. If someone's coming down while you're going up, one of you is going to have to flatten yourself against the wall and hope today isn't the day the whole thing collapses. Also, don't run. Ever. That's how Lucius broke his ankle and got evicted for screaming too loudly. Noise? Constant. You live with, near, or above at least 30 other people. Not to mention chickens, goats, and that one neighbor who plays the tibia at inappropriate hours. Everything echoes. Arguments become public entertainment. You hear every cough, burp, and ill-timed love poem, shouted through thin plaster. Privacy? Not a thing. Not even conceptually. If you want solitude, your best bet is a poorly timed rooftop nap, and that's assuming the roof hasn't caved in again. Speaking of the roof, yes, it's technically there. But rain doesn't care about your technicalities. The ceiling leaks. Always. Water drips into buckets, buckets overflow. Sometimes the bucket collapses through the floor and lands on someone else's dinner. It's the circle of insular life. And in summer, the top floor becomes a furnace. Heat rises, air doesn't circulate, and the walls absorb sunlight like they're trying to cook you from the outside in. And then there's the big one, fire. Your entire building is a matchbox waiting for a reason. Charcoal braziers for cooking, oil lamps for light, neighbors who fall asleep mid-boil. The floors are dry wood, the walls are flammable. The ceilings are made of lies and dust. If one apartment catches fire, the whole block can go up in flames in minutes. There's no fire brigade, no sprinkler system, just screaming and the faint hope that you can outrun combustion in a toga and sandals. In fact, fire was such a regular occurrence that Emperor Augustus had to create a special firefighting force vigiles because too many insulae were burning down. Entire neighborhoods just gone. Rome didn't have a housing crisis. It had a "our housing keeps turning into ash" crisis. Oh, and let's not forget, the fire isn't the only danger. These buildings collapse too, just randomly. Poor construction, heavy rains, or some over-enthusiastic stomping from the neighbor upstairs. You could be mid-sentence and find yourself suddenly on the floor below. No warning, no compensation, just gravity and bad planning. Despite all this, people lived here. Families, merchants, students, retirees. They raised kids in these rooms. They cooked, cleaned, argued, laughed, gossiped, and somehow, miraculously, didn't all perish in a puff of smoke. The community was strong. Everyone knew everyone. And when the roof leaked, someone usually had a tarp, or at least a sarcastic comment. So as you admire your modern home with its fire exits, stable floors, and ceiling that stays in place, remember that in ancient Rome, survival wasn't just a daily goal, it was a full-time hobby. And living in an insula meant you were always one overcooked lentil away from disaster. But you kept going, because that's what humans do. Even when the floors groan, the roof leaks, and your walls might literally catch fire mid-lunch. Welcome home, watch your step, and maybe keep a bucket of sand by the bed, just in case. The sun hasn't risen yet, but you're already awake thanks to the gladiator in training screaming outside. Your bed? A sack of straw and shattered dreams. You stretch, but one wrong move, and you'll elbow your neighbor, who may or may not be your cousin, or a goat. Welcome to the Subura, Rome's loudest, sweatiest, most suspicious-smelling neighborhood. If the city of Rome were a toga, the Subura would be the wine-stained hem dragging through the mud. Home to poets, thieves, bakers, pickpockets, wannabe philosophers, and actual philosophers who are mostly just unemployed. It's dense, chaotic, and humming with the unmistakable energy of 40,000 people trying to mind their own business in the same 10 square blocks. Your apartment is on the third floor of an insula that should really be condemned, but Rome has never been a fan of safety regulations. The walls are thin, the air is thick, and the mattress beneath you is technically organic if you count the lice, straw, and general despair. You've got a thin blanket that smells like old olives, and your pillow is just a rolled-up tunic that's seen too much. Comfort? That's a luxury item. You're here for survival, and maybe, if you're lucky, breakfast. Outside your window well, the hole in the wall with a curtained Subura is already alive. A butcher is shouting about his deals on slightly haunted sausages. A street performer is juggling rocks and yelling poetry. Somewhere nearby, a baby is crying, a cartwheel is squealing, and someone just knocked over a crate of what might have been figs, or possibly angry ferrets. It's hard to say. You sit up, slowly, because rapid movement is not advisable in a room where the ceiling flakes and your bedmates have hooves. The room is packed. You live with your entire extended family, grandparents, siblings, some unverified cousins, and possibly a guy named Quintus, who just never left after dinner last year. Everyone sleeping shoulder to shoulder, with only the occasional elbow to the ribs as a greeting. As you shift to the edge of the bed, your foot lands in something squishy. You don't look. You never look. That's the Subura rule. If you can't identify it by smell or sound, it's not your problem. Besides, the goat is already licking it, and she seems fine. Your morning begins not with peace or birdsong, but with noise. So much noise. Romans don't believe in whispering. The street below sounds like a full-scale marketplace despite it being barely past dawn. Everyone is shouting, arguing, selling, scolding, or just narrating their lives at full volume. One man is loudly breaking up with his girlfriend from a second-story balcony. Two women are yelling about who stole whose laundry. And someone is playing the pan flute terribly and proudly. There's no privacy. None. You're awake, and so is everyone else. Your neighbor's bathroom trip is your morning entertainment. The guy in the next building over is brushing his teeth with wine and spitting it dramatically out the window. A pigeon lands on your sill, stares at you for a second, and then poops on your curtain. Classic Subura greeting. You stumble toward the corner of the room where your sandals are of course missing, probably chewed by the goat, or borrowed by your uncle. Again. So you opt for bare feet on the creaky wooden floor, which is either sticky from spilled olive oil or damp from the leak that never really stops. Either way, your soles now feel like they've aged 10 years. The air is warm, heavy, and seasoned with the smells of 10 other apartments. Someone is cooking garlic lentils. Someone else is burning incense to Jupiter. Someone, definitely your downstairs neighbor, is boiling fish guts. It's like breathing through a wet sponge dipped in soup. And you're still not dressed. Your tunic hangs limply on a peg by the door. It hasn't been washed in a month, but then again, neither have you. You give it the old sniff test. It fails. But you put it on anyway, because dignity left this building sometime around the last sewer overflow. The floors groan, the walls sweat, and the goat's making eye contact like it knows something you don't. You reach for your belt pouch, check for your one remaining as coin, and open the door straight into a man, delivering bread and life advice simultaneously. He offers you a loaf and says, "Don't trust anyone who eats cheese in July." You nod solemnly. It's too early to argue. Congratulations. You've survived another Roman morning in the Subura. Your ears are ringing, your tunic is itchy, and your goat is following you down the stairs. Time to find water, maybe a crust of bread, and definitely some sandals. And try not to trip on the gladiator again. He's still practicing, with a tree trunk, shirtless, loudly. Another perfect start to the day. You know everything about your neighbors. Not because you're nosy, because the walls are whisper thin. You sneeze? 10 people bless you. You argue? Everyone takes sides. Privacy is a myth. And yes, you just heard your upstairs neighbor drop his chamber pot. Again. The Insula is not a building. It's a symphony of other people's problems playing at full volume, all day, every day. The walls are so thin they may as well be made of damp papyrus. And the floorboards creak with the exhausted sighs of generations past. You don't just live in your apartment, you share your apartment with everyone in earshot. This includes your upstairs neighbor, Publius, who walks like he's angry at gravity and dumps his chamber pot with the dramatic flair of a disgraced senator throwing a scroll. Every morning, without fail. It's not so much a noise as it is a performance. And it always lands with a wet, echoing splat that makes you question all of your life choices. Your bedroom wall shares space with Claudia and her 7 children, one of whom is apparently training to be a professional screamer. You've never seen them, but you could draw each child's personality from sound alone. One sings tunelessly, one throws things, one just sobs. Constantly. You feel a strange, parasocial attachment to these people you've never met. You're rooting for them, but also please stop yelling. From the other side, there's Flavius, who insists on debating Stoic philosophy at full volume with anyone who will listen or won't. His voice carries through walls, floors, and possibly time. You've learned more about the teachings of Epictetus than you ever wanted to. Sometimes, you hear him arguing with himself. Sometimes, he wins. And downstairs? That's where the real party is. Gaius the fishmonger lives below you, and he stores his inventory in the hallway. By inventory, we mean buckets of dead fish, slowly fermenting in the Roman heat. He also sings sea shanties, badly, and his favorite time to do this is midnight, accompanied by what can only be described as enthusiastic sloshing. You try to ignore it. You try to sleep. But your bed is a sound amplifier. Every snore, whisper, and bad lute solo becomes your lullaby. If someone 2 buildings over stubs their toe, you hear it. If the woman across the alley is arguing with her boyfriend again, spoiler, she is, you get the entire transcript. Walls, Don't keep secrets here. They leak them. You know who's cheating, who's broke, who's having a baby, and who hasn't paid rent in 6 months. You once woke up to an argument about a stolen sandal that escalated into a screaming match involving 3 families and a goat. You never found out who actually took the sandal, but you did learn that Octavia has a secret second husband in Ostia. And the thing is, no one cares. This is normal. In fact, silence is suspicious. If your home is too quiet, people assume you're either dead or hiding something. The Subura thrives on gossip like its currency. It flows faster than the Tiber, and with twice as much trash. Neighbors lean out windows to shout across the alley. Mothers scold children 3 floors down. Teens declare undying love by yelling very bad poetry into the night. It's beautiful. It's awful. It's home. Sometimes, the noise syncs up like an accidental opera. Someone starts cooking, another starts singing, a child cries, a dog howls, a lute plinks off key, and then someone somewhere drops a pot. You don't know whether to cry or applaud, so you just lie there, staring at your flickering oil lamp, wondering if this is what Cicero meant by the good life. Still, there's something weirdly comforting about it. If the building goes quiet, you know something's wrong. The noise is proof of life. Proof that the neighbors are still fighting, the children are still shrieking, and the guy upstairs is still dramatically incompetent with his chamber pot. Over time, you learn to filter it. You can sleep through shouting matches, tune out flute solos, and identify individuals based solely on their sneeze cadence. You're practically fluent in muffled Latin. You could write a novel based on just what you've overheard through the walls, and people would think it was fiction. But make no mistake, this isn't just inconvenience. It's survival. In the Subura, knowing who's yelling at whom can keep you out of fights, out of trouble, or at least out of the splash zone. You listen, you learn, and you remember. If someone calls out for help in the middle of the night, you'll hear it. And so will 20 other people. That's the upside. So you roll over, pulling your scratchy blanket tighter, trying to ignore the upstairs flute, the downstairs fish chant, and the ongoing mystery argument about figs. You sigh, close your eyes and remind yourself, this is Rome, and silence is a luxury no one here can afford. Sleep tight, just maybe don't sneeze again tonight. You'll wake the entire block. Your Insula's staircase is made of wood, mystery stains, and fear. It leans slightly to the left and groans with every step. Going down, it feels like descending into the underworld with groceries. Let's be clear. This staircase is not just inconvenient. It's actively hostile. It was slapped together by a man named Aulus who once saw a ladder and thought, that but worse. There are no handrails. The steps are uneven. The support beams look like they gave up years ago and are now just there for moral support. And that slight lean to the left? That's not an illusion. That's structural surrender. Every journey down is a gamble. You could make it safely to the street, or you could find yourself suddenly and intimately acquainted with Gaius, the shirtless blacksmith on the first floor, after crashing through 3 layers of your neighbor's apartments. It's like a trust fall, but the only thing catching you is gravity and possibly someone's dinner. If you live above the 2nd floor, this staircase is your life, and possibly your death. You know every creaky board, every suspicious gap, and that one step that feels soft in a way no step should. Step too fast, and you'll go airborne. Step too slow, and the stair might give out entirely. Pick your peril. The mystery stains don't help. Are they wine? Oil? Something from that one time the baker's cat went missing? Nobody knows, and nobody asks. You just avoid the 3rd stair from the top because it smells like defeat and anchovy brine. And don't even look at the wall, whatever's dripping from it has its own ecosystem now. And the lighting? Hilarious. There isn't any. The stairwell is a vertical cave with just enough ambient light to see your regrets. You'd think someone would install a torch or an oil lamp. They did. It got stolen. Twice. Now, you either walk down blind or risk carrying your own lamp perfect if you've always wanted to juggle fire while walking on a death trap. Let's talk traffic. The staircase is barely wide enough for one person. and yet somehow you always meet someone coming up while you're trying to go down. This results in an awkward shuffle dance that ends with one of you pressed against the wall, praying the plaster doesn't crumble like a dry biscuit. And if they're carrying something, like laundry, groceries, or worse, a goat, then congratulations. It's now a group project. You've got to turn sideways, flatten yourself against a wall that may or may not be load-bearing, and smile politely while the goat tries to chew your tunic, all while pretending you don't feel your knee sinking through the floorboard. And God's forbid someone drops something. A jug of wine, a loaf of bread, a bucket of charcoal. Once it hits a step, it's all over. Ancient Roman staircases have no forgiveness. That jug becomes a missile. That bread is a tripwire. That charcoal becomes 50 tiny marbles that turn every step into a slapstick death trap. It's funny when it happens to someone else. When it's you, it's a slow-motion montage of poor life decisions. Oh, and remember, there's no maintenance crew. No kindly landlord popping by to fix the loose board. If you want repairs, you get a hammer, a prayer, and maybe a bribe for the upstairs neighbor's teenage son who once saw someone fix a floor. You patch it with whatever you've got: broken tiles, rope, a sandal you gave up on years ago, and hope it holds until Saturnalia. Sometimes you fantasize about a normal staircase, one made of marble, even just level wood, something without a wasp nest in the corner. But no, this is Rome, and you live in the Suburra, and here the staircases are not for comfort. They are for humbling your soul and strengthening your thighs, because by the time you reach the bottom, you've done a full workout. Your calves are shaking, your heart is racing, and you've invented 3 new curse words in Latin. You step onto the street like a triumphant gladiator who just won a match against architecture, and then you remember you forgot your coin purse upstairs. You stare up at the slanted, groaning, shadow-filled climb and wonder if you can live without coins forever. Maybe trade your shoes for lentils. Maybe marry into a family that lives on the first floor. But no. You take a breath, retighten your sandals, and place your foot on the first stair. It wobbles like a sarcastic handshake. Up you go, one creak at a time. Because in ancient Rome, even stairs are out to get you. Morning hunger kicks in. You open your pantry, which is really just a basket hanging from a nail. Inside, a crusty hunk of yesterday's bread and a few suspicious olives. No toaster, no coffee. Just chewy carbs and the smell of someone else's fish sauce wafting through the window. Welcome to breakfast in ancient Rome if you live in an insula, that is. There's no fancy spread, no avocado toast, and definitely no oat milk latte. Your meal prep consists of checking if the mice have left anything edible, blowing the dust off your bread, and muttering a small prayer to Mercury that you don't chip a tooth. That hunk of bread is roughly the texture of ancient concrete and twice as dense. It's not so much eaten as endured. Olives, on the other hand, are plentiful, oily, and deeply suspicious. Some are fine. Some are soft in a way olives shouldn't be. Some might actually be grapes pretending to be olives. You don't know. You don't ask. You eat them with a forced optimism and hope today isn't the day they betray your intestines. There's no refrigeration. Everything is either salted, smoked, pickled, or boiled. Your nose is your best friend, and your only defense against food poisoning. You sniff the bread dry and safe. Sniff the olives questionable, but still in the game. You almost reach for the jar of leftover lentils, but remember last time ended with a 6-hour conversation with the household latrine. Pass. You perch on a creaky stool near the window to enjoy your meal, which consists of slowly gnawing on the bread while watching a goat fight a street vendor over a melon. Outside, the sounds of the Suburra are already in full swing. Somewhere nearby, someone is burning something that smells like regret wrapped in cabbage. Now, if you're lucky, your neighbor might invite you to share a small breakfast. If you're unlucky, your neighbor is the one who eats raw garlic at dawn and believes loudly in fasting. Either way, you're probably on your own. No utensils, no plates, just fingers and hope. Bread is your spoon, olives are your flavor. If you're feeling fancy, maybe a drizzle of garum, the infamous fermented fish sauce Romans insisted on using like we use ketchup. It smells like something that was left out during the Punic Wars. But it adds depth, allegedly. You try a drop. Instant regret. You chase it with bread and chew while trying to remember the last time you tasted something that didn't make your eyes water. And just when you think it can't get worse, someone 2 floors up dumps their leftover soup out the window. It splashes onto the street below and, somehow, into your open window. Now your bread is soggy and smells faintly of beans and revenge. There's no coffee, no tea, no warm milk, unless you own a goat and feel confident, enough to wrestle it for a cup. Most Romans just drink water if it's available, or sour wine mixed with herbs. You consider a sip of the wine you saved from yesterday but decide against it. It's not even noon, and you don't want to start hallucinating this early. You look at the remaining chunk of bread and try to remember what joy tasted like. You briefly consider warming it over a brazier, but last time you tried, you nearly lit your tunic on fire. Toast is a luxury reserved for people with stable homes and fireproof pants. Instead, you sit quietly, chewing slowly, staring at the crumb-covered table and listening to your neighbors argue about whether figs are an acceptable breakfast. Answer: they are, if you can afford them and don't mind bees. At least the pigeons are keeping you company. 3 of them are perched on the windowsill, staring at your olives with military precision. One takes a step closer. You lock eyes. The pigeon blinks. You blink. You pop an olive in safe, your mouth out of spite. It was a mistake. It was very much expired. This is breakfast in a Roman insula. Equal parts survival and disappointment. No menu, no eggs, no cinnamon swirls. Just bread that could double as building material, olives of dubious character, and air that smells like 10 other people's bad decisions. And still you eat it, because this is what morning looks like. You chew, you nod, you endure. And maybe, if the gods are kind, you'll come across a fig or a date at the forum later. Or someone might accidentally drop one from their balcony, and you'll catch it before it hits the gutter. A small miracle in a city that specializes in large inconveniences. So you finish your last bite of regret-flavored bread, wipe your hands on your tunic, and stand up, stomach only partially full but pride mostly intact. Another successful Roman breakfast. And now, it's time to find real food. Or at least something that doesn't smell like socks. Toileting in a Roman insula is a social, strategic, and slightly athletic event. There's a communal latrine somewhere downstairs, unless you prefer the old bucket and chuck method. Just aim for the gutter and yell, "Cave," because your neighbors might not appreciate the surprise. Welcome to one of ancient Rome's least glamorous realities, the bathroom situation. Or, more accurately, the lack of it. There's no ensuite, no flush, no soft lighting or pleasant lavender-scented candles. Just a public toilet that smells like it holds ancient grudges, and a set of stairs that will make you question how badly you really need to go. Let's break it down. If you live in a typical insula, your choices are limited. The communal latrine is most likely on the ground floor, or even outside, shared by every single resident in the building. That's anywhere from 30 to 100 people, all relying on one unfortunate bench with holes in it. If the gods are feeling kind, it's made of stone. If they're not, it's just a piece of wood and the hope that it holds together. And yes, it's communal. As in, no stalls, no doors, no walls. Just you, your neighbors, and the unspoken agreement to make very pointed eye contact with the floor. If you're lucky, someone hums to drown out the sounds. If you're unlucky, your neighbor strikes up a conversation about fish prices while you're mid-squat. The smell? Imagine if vinegar, wet wool, fermented meat, and the ghost of bad decisions all got trapped in a cave. That's the latrine on a good day. On a bad day, it's overflowing, attracting flies, and a few rats who are honestly just trying to vibe like everyone else. You never sit fully relaxed. It's more of a hover squat, one eye on the doorway and one foot ready to flee if something unexpected starts scuttling. Of course, you could avoid the communal latrine entirely and do what many insular residents do: the bucket. Yes, that's right. A chamber pot, hidden behind a curtain in your apartment. Used discreetly, then dumped usually out the window and into the street below. A method that's been dubbed, quite politely, bucket and chuck it. But there are rules, sort of. Before flinging anything out the window, you're supposed to yell, "Cave," pronounced Carway, to warn pedestrians that something unholy is coming from above. It's the ancient Roman version of heads up, only instead of a falling ball, it's, well, yesterday's dinner and poor decisions. Did people always yell it? Of course not. Sometimes they forgot, sometimes they were spiteful, and sometimes, well, they just didn't care. Getting hit by mystery liquid from above was just part of the Roman pedestrian experience. You walk fast. You wear a hood. You hope for the best. Cleaning yourself is also an adventure. No soft toilet paper here, just a communal sponge on a stick, soaking in a bucket of water and vinegar. It's called a tersorium, shared by everyone. One sponge. Many people. It's the ultimate test of trust, hygiene, and how much you value your immune system. You try not to think about it. You try not to make eye contact with it. And heaven forbid the sponge goes missing. Then you're left with plan B. Leaves, rags, or whatever you can find. You once heard of a man using part of his toga in an emergency. You now look at togas differently. Timing is also everything. Go too early, and the latrine hasn't been cleaned from the night before. Go too late, and you're waiting in a line, making small talk with your neighbor, while pretending not to hear the person inside humming nervously. Go during the middle of the night? Brave, reckless, and possibly never seen again. The stairwell is dark, slippery, and cursed. You may as well dig a hole and hope for divine forgiveness. And yet, somehow, this all works. The Romans had a functioning sanitation system, at least in theory. Latrines connected to sewers, and those sewers carried waste out to the Tiber River, which was already a swirling cocktail of filth, fish, and optimism. The Cloaca Maxima was a marvel of engineering. The issue? Your insula was not. If the pipes clogged, they stayed clogged. If the smell rose, you simply lived with it. But the most astonishing part? You get used to it. The smell, the sponge, the danger of accidental defenestration, it becomes part of the routine. Like brushing your teeth. Except no one brushes their teeth because toothbrushes haven't been invented yet and you're still dealing with the trauma of the fish sauce. So you make your daily decision. The long trek down to the public latrine, or the bucket and chuck route with a whispered cave and a prayer that the street clears in time. Because in ancient Rome, using the bathroom wasn't just a basic need, it was a social experiment in patience, caution, and shared suffering. Hold your nose, mind the stairs, and for Jupiter's sake, look up. Need water? Grab your jar and your patience. The nearest fountain is 3 blocks away, uphill, and there's already a line. By the time you haul it home, half's been spilled, and the other half tastes like lead and ancient disappointment. Because unless you're living in a senator's private villa with your own indoor plumbing and a dedicated water slave named Felix, you're hoofing it to the public fonds. Every single day. In theory, Rome's water system is brilliant. Aqueducts bring fresh water in from miles away, channeling it into public fountains, baths, and latrines. It's one of the crown jewels of Roman engineering. In practice, though, if you live in a multi-story fire trap of an insula, that glorious water is not flowing up to your 5th-floor apartment like some luxury waterfall. It stops at street level. So congratulations, you're the plumbing now. You grab your amphora, a tall clay jug that somehow manages to be both incredibly heavy and incredibly fragile. You wedge it into the crook of your elbow, brace your back, and begin the noble Roman tradition of the daily water run. The street is already bustling with other water haulers, all muttering curses and sweating through their tunics. You spot Julia from next door carrying a jug half her size, grumbling about how her cousin borrowed her second amphora and hasn't been seen since, probably faked his own death to avoid another trip to the fountain. And of course, the nearest fountain is never just downstairs. It's uphill, through 2 alleys and across a very questionable intersection where carts, goats, children, and the occasional runaway gladiator all intersect like a badly managed board game. You finally arrive. The line is long. It's always long. People chatting, bickering, bartering spots. The guy in front of you is rinsing his sandals in the basin like it's his personal foot spa. You sigh. You wait. You try not to get splashed. The fountain itself is beautiful marble, flowing water, maybe even a sculpted lion, spitting water into a bowl. But you're not here for aesthetics. You're here for hydration and back pain. When your turn comes, you wedge the amphora under the spout, hoping the water pressure hasn't decided to take a holiday. You hold it steady, praying your arm doesn't cramp. You nod politely to the woman behind you, who is definitely judging your jar-holding technique. You pretend not to notice the pigeon bathing 2 inches from the spout. Filled, you cork your jug and begin the slow, wobbling trudge back home. Your arms scream, your sandals slide. Your amphora tips with every uneven cobblestone like it's possessed by a clumsy ghost. A kid bumps into you splash. A man selling eels flails dramatically splash. A cartwheel sends a jolt through the pavement splash. By the time you make it to your building, you've lost a solid third of your precious cargo to the gods of bad luck and poor city planning. But wait, you're not done. You still have to carry it upstairs. There are no elevators. There are barely stairs. Just that slanted, creaking spine of doom you call a stairwell. You shift the amphora against your hip, take a deep breath, and start climbing. Every step is a leg workout. Every landing feels like a checkpoint in a very wet, very heavy video game. You consider drinking half the water just to lighten the load, but that defeats the purpose and would probably summon the wrath of your roommate, who's already mad you didn't bring more olives. At last, you reach your door, shoulder aching, tunic soaked, and hair suspiciously frizzy from proximity to at least one exploding bread oven. You place the jug in the corner, where it will serve as your daily ration for cooking, drinking, washing, and maybe extinguishing the next spontaneous fire. And then, only then do you remember that you need more water for the chamber pot bucket. Back down you go. Because in ancient Rome, staying hydrated wasn't just about drinking water, it was a test of will, strength, and your ability to avoid falling face first into a communal trough. You learn to cherish every drop, curse every splash, and pray that tomorrow the line at the fountain is just a little shorter. It won't be. Modern plumbing is a miracle you never knew to miss until now. Faucets, sorcery, showers, literal magic. A cold glass of water with ice cubes. That's elite-level luxury the average Roman couldn't even begin to imagine. So the next time you turn on the tap without hauling a jug, fighting a pigeon, and climbing Mount Olympus in sandals, take a moment to appreciate it. Because for ancient Romans, water wasn't free-flowing convenience. It was a whole lifestyle of effort, frustration, and upper body strength. Cheers. Try not to spill. There's no private bath. That's cute. You go to the thermae, Rome's public bathhouses. If you're lucky, the water's only slightly murky. If you're unlucky, you leave with more friends on your skin than you came with. Hygiene, Roman style, is a community event. And by community, I mean dozens of strangers crammed into a steamy complex where everyone pretends that nudity, body odor, and floating hair clumps are just part of the charm. Personal space? Not a thing. Modesty? Cute idea. You're here to scrub down, soak up, and ideally avoid catching anything that requires a poultice and a goat sacrifice. So, you gather your supplies. A strigil, that's a curved metal scraper. Some olive oil, because soap isn't a thing yet. And your towel, which is really just a piece of fabric you're hoping no one steals. You wrap yourself in what little dignity you have left, brace your senses, and head to the nearest thermae along with what feels like half the population of Rome. The bathhouse is an architectural marvel, of course. Giant columns, mosaic floors, steam curling up like a dramatic stage entrance. There's a front area where you hand your clothes to a young attendant who looks like he'd rather be anywhere else. You nod solemnly, knowing full well that when you return, at least one of your sandals will be missing. You step inside and are immediately hit with a wall of heat, steam, and the unmistakable smell of humanity. It's like being hugged by a giant wet sock. The air is thick, the sound is louder. Men are shouting, laughing, debating politics at full volume while rubbing olive oil into each other's backs. One guy is reciting poetry while flexing. Another is trying to sell oysters out of a basket. You don't ask. Your first stop is the apodyterium, the changing room. You strip down and try to act natural, which is hard when the guy next to you has a back tattoo of the goddess Venus riding a dolphin and is talking about his cousin's hemorrhoids. You clutch your strigil like it's a weapon and shuffle into the next room. The bath process itself is a sequence, and skipping steps is considered uncivilized. First up, the tepidarium, a warm room designed to ease you into the experience. You sit on a stone bench, sweat quietly, and listen to a merchant explaining loudly why his grain is better than that guy's grain. A child runs by screaming. Someone sneezes on your shoulder. You close your eyes and pretend you're anywhere else. Next comes the caldarium, the hot room. It's a steamy inferno with a scalding plunge pool that smells like wet ambition. You slather yourself with olive oil, because again, no soap, just oil. Then, using your strigil, you scrape off the oil along with dead skin, dirt, and any lingering dignity. The floor is slippery, the air is soup, and the man next to you is singing a song about turnips, loudly. You emerge red-faced, half-blind from the steam, and slicker than a greased eel. But you're not done. Now it's time for the frigidarium, the cold bath. A bracing, sanity-questioning plunge into a pool of icy water designed to close your pores and maybe restart your heart. You dunk yourself in, gasping like a man who's just met Poseidon, then shoot back up to the surface wondering why you thought this would be refreshing. Afterwards, you towel off, retrieve your belongings, minus one sandal as predicted, and head back into the city, smelling vaguely of olives, sweat, and crushed ego. You are technically clean. You are spiritually exhausted. Of course, there are risks. The bathhouses are social hubs, but also germ factories. There's no chlorine, no water filter, just bodies, oil, and hope. If someone walks in with a rash, you're probably walking out with one. But hey, at least you didn't catch lice this time. Progress. Still, for all their flaws, the thermae are vital. They're where you network, gossip, eavesdrop, and occasionally get into polite fistfights about olive prices. Everyone from slaves to senators uses them. It's the great equalizer, because no one looks dignified while slipping on a wet tile mid-oyster bite. And the best part? It's cheap. The baths are subsidized, so even you, proud resident of a crumbling insula, can afford to smell less like moldy fish sauce and more like socially acceptable olives, if only for a few glorious hours. So you walk home, one sandal on, towel over your shoulder, slightly less sticky than you were this morning. You'll be filthy again by lunch, but for now you're victorious. You bathed. You survived. You even avoided eye contact with the guy shaving his back on the hot bench. Not bad for a Thursday. Tomorrow, though, maybe you'll just stick with a sponge bath and denial. Laundry means scrubbing tunics in cold water, using fermented urine as detergent, and hoping it doesn't rain on your drying line strung between two buildings. Bonus points if your neighbor doesn't steal your socks. Yes, welcome to Laundry Day in ancient Rome. A day filled with smells, elbow grease, and existential questions like, was I cleaner before this process started? Because in the Roman Insula, cleanliness isn't next to godliness. It's next to the fishmonger's grease bucket and the goat with boundary issues. Let's begin with the harsh truth. Laundry in ancient Rome is a workout, a gamble, and a group activity, whether you like it or not. There are no washing machines, no fabric softener, no gentle cycle. Just buckets of water, stiff tunics, and liquid ammonia in its most ancient, creatively recycled form. Human urine. Yes, urine. Donated generously by passers-by into public pots set out on street corners. It's not theft, it's laundry contribution. Once collected, the precious golden liquid is taken to full-on professional laundries run by workers with iron stomachs and questionable career paths. The fullers stomp the garments barefoot in vats of urine and water, turning your crusty toga into something almost wearable again. It's like a wine press, but much, much sadder. Now, you could send your clothes to a professional fullery, if you're feeling fancy or just tired of explaining to your roommate why the house smells like sour lemons and shame. But if you're poor, and you are, you're doing it yourself, which means finding a basin, preferably not one you also use to prepare food, and gathering up your linens, tunics, undergarments, and that one sock that somehow always vanishes mid-process. You drag your laundry to the shared courtyard or rooftop space, where several of your neighbors are also scrubbing away, singing work songs, gossiping, and occasionally passive-aggressively splashing each other. There's a strict, unspoken order. First dibs go to the woman with the most children, then the man with the strongest arms, then whoever brought wine to share. You kneel by the basin, toss in the clothes, pour in the cleaning solution, a bracing mix of water, old pee, and wishful thinking, and get to scrubbing. No gloves, no brushes. Just your hands, your will to live, and a smooth rock you named Marcus, because it's been your only, consistent laundry partner. Scrubbing is aggressive. You slap, twist, slap again. The tunic fights back. The dirt seems embedded at the molecular level. Someone next to you is beating a cloak like it owes them money. You wonder if you should try that too. A child kicks over your rinse bucket. You don't cry. You've accepted that laundry day is where dignity goes to die. Once clean a word we're using generously, it's time to rinse. You refill the basin with the cleanest water you can find, which is to say, not visibly brown. You wring out each item like it insulted your ancestors, then drape them on the nearest available line, railing, or goat. The sun is your only dryer, and clouds are your nemesis. Of course, the drying line situation is a nightmare. Your insula doesn't have a garden. You live 4 stories up. Your best bet is stringing a line across the alley to your neighbor's window. You tie one end to your window, the other to his, and then pray that neither of you leans too hard on it while hanging socks. And the socks? You guard them like treasure. They're easy to steal, easier to lose, and impossible to match. If you find 2 that look similar, you marry them on the spot. They're a couple now, a mismatched, tragic, very Roman couple. Wind is not your friend. On a good day, it helps dry your garments faster. On a bad day, it flings your underpants into the forum, where a senator trips on them and starts a 3-hour debate about public decency. Rain? That's the gods laughing at you. You just spent 3 hours soaking, scrubbing, and slapping your clothes into reluctant cleanliness, and now Jupiter decides to throw a tantrum. You scramble to pull things down, slipping on suds, yelling at the sky like a dramatic Greek chorus. The goat is eating your tunic. You give up. Eventually, you retrieve what's left of your laundry. Half is dry, half is damp. A quarter of it now smells faintly of fish from the vendor down the street. You fold it anyway, because standards are low and your back hurts. Laundry day ends not with satisfaction, but with resignation. You stack your clean clothes in the corner, pour yourself a cup of terrible wine, and vow to burn everything next time and just live in a toga made of bark. But deep down, you know you'll be back at it next week, rock in hand, urine in basin, hoping this is finally the day Marcus the Laundry Stone earns his Roman citizenship. Because in the Insula, cleanliness isn't next to godliness. It's just another uphill battle. Literally. Especially when the drying line snaps. If you're wealthy, you've got a small hearth. If you're not, you're borrowing your neighbor's flaming pile of bricks and praying your lentils don't explode. Fire safety? No one's heard of it, but your eyebrows might be optional. Welcome to culinary excellence in the Roman Insula, where kitchen is just a generous word for corner with smoke damage. There's no counter space, no cupboards, and definitely no sink. If you want to cook, you get fire, clay, and the creeping suspicion that one wrong move will turn dinner into a building-wide emergency. Most insular apartments don't even have real cooking facilities. The floors are wood, the walls are plaster, and the ceilings are basically flammable suggestions. Lighting a fire inside your home is considered both necessary and, at the same time, a low-stakes death wish. So instead, many people cook in shared spaces, tiny courtyards, rooftops, or, if you're feeling bold, the stair landing that no one's patched since the reign of Augustus. Your cooking setup is a small brazier, a squat, soot-covered metal basin filled with charcoal. It produces a lot of heat, a little light, and exactly zero forgiveness. It has two moods: not hot enough to cook, and hot enough to liquefy bronze. You place your humble clay pot on top, and immediately remember last time when you burned your hand, your lentils, and nearly your neighbor's cat. Speaking of lentils, they're on the menu again. Lentils are the Roman poor's answer to every meal. Breakfast lentils, boiled lentils, fried lentils. Lentils mixed with mystery herbs you found behind the latrine if you've got lentils. And hope, you've got dinner. Unless, of course, you forget to soak them, and they cook into angry little pebbles that chip teeth and dreams alike. You crouch near the brazier, poking the embers with a stick like a nervous woodland creature. The fire flickers, the pot bubbles. The smell is promising? You're not sure. It might be the lentils, or it might be the upstairs tenant trying to roast a fish with questionable freshness. There's no timer, no temperature control, just vibes. You stare at the pot, willing it not to overflow. One bubble too many, and you'll be scraping lentil crust off your walls until Saturnalia. Stirring helps. So does threatening the pot aloud. A neighbor wanders by and casually offers you a pinch of garum, the fermented fish sauce that Romans sprinkle on everything like it's magic fairy dust. You say yes, instantly regretting it. Now your lentils smell like an ocean crime scene, but it's fine. It's Roman flavor. Sometimes you get fancy and try baking bread. This involves balancing dough on a flat rock near the heat and praying no one sneezes. The crust is usually too hard. The inside is somehow still raw. You eat it anyway because you spent half the day trading half a chicken's foot for that flour. And let's not forget the wind. The courtyard acts like a giant wind tunnel. One gust and your fire's out. Two gusts and your pot's upside down. Your tunic is singed, and your neighbor is yelling that you've blinded his goat. You apologize while clutching your smoking pot and wondering if raw lentils count as a meal. If it rains, you're out of luck. Cooking in the rain means soggy charcoal, slippery clay, and a rising chorus of angry shouts from every other drenched cook in the building. You can try cooking indoors, but then it's you versus the laws of thermodynamics and probably the fire brigade, which is just two guys with buckets and bad attitudes. Once the food is finally done, burned on the bottom, boiling on top, and vaguely edible in the middle, you serve it in whatever vessel survived the heat. Usually a chipped bowl or a flat tile you convinced yourself was rustic. You eat sitting on the ground, trying to ignore the smell of someone else's failed stew wafting from 3 floors up. And yet, somehow, it's not the worst meal you've ever had. Maybe it's the satisfaction of having conquered the brazier without catching on fire. Maybe it's the way the lentils have fused into something resembling a cohesive paste. Or maybe it's just the hunger. Because by the time you eat, you've already burned 600 calories just preparing it. Cleanup is simple. There is none. You scrape out the pot, rinse it with a splash of water, if you still have any, and set it aside for tomorrow's repeat performance. The brazier stays hot for hours, warming the courtyard and attracting curious pigeons. You stretch your aching legs, pat your slightly scorched tunic, and sigh. Another meal survived, another fire barely avoided, another chance to wonder what it must be like to have a kitchen with walls, doors, and zero combustion. But this is insular life, and in insular life, cooking is chaos. Controlled chaos if you're lucky. Now, try not to trip over the cat on your way back inside. It's still mad about last week's soup incident. The streets never sleep. At night, you'll hear drunk philosophers reciting poetry, dogs barking at shadows, and someone loudly regretting their life choices. Sleep? That's something rich people do. Welcome to the Roman night shift. An involuntary audio experience brought to you by thin walls, cobbled streets, and everyone else's insomnia. If you thought the Subura district might calm down after dark, you'd be adorably mistaken. Daytime Rome is chaos. Nighttime Rome is chaos, wearing a toga, holding a lyre, and yelling about Caesar. Your bed, or rather, your woven mat stuffed with straw and probable insects, sits near a window with zero insulation. You tried to stuff a rag in the cracks to block the wind. Now the rag whistles. It joins the orchestra of noises, keeping you wide-eyed and emotionally fragile at 2 a.m. Let's start with the classics. Dogs. Packs of them. They roam the streets like furry mobs with vendettas. They bark at cats, carts, each other, and sometimes the moon. No one knows whose dogs they are. Possibly nobody's. Possibly Jupiter's. Either way, they have thoughts and feelings, and they express all of them all night long. Then there's the singing. Not the nice kind. Not like lullabies or soothing odes. No, it's your upstairs neighbor, Titus, who believes he is Rome's answer to Orpheus. He is not. He sings like a wounded donkey, doing karaoke through a tin funnel. And yet, every night, after his 6th cup of watered wine, he serenades the entire Insula with his original compositions about lost love and boiled chickpeas. Sometimes he's joined by his cousin, who plays the panpipes with the musical subtlety of a collapsing aqueduct. Together, they form what is technically a musical duo but emotionally a cry for help. You try to roll over. You wrap your tunic over your head like a sad blanket. And that's when the street philosophers show up. There's always one, usually named something like Crispus. He's had a little too much wine, and now feels deeply compelled to recite Virgil while staggering through the alley, loudly, with pauses. Sometimes to vomit, sometimes to argue with an invisible rival, and sometimes just to appreciate his own voice echoing off the stone. And then, of course, the couple downstairs begins their nightly argument. No one knows what it's about. It might be politics. It might be garum. It might be the goat that keeps eating their laundry. Either way, they argue with the passion of a courtroom drama and the volume of 2 gladiators mic'd for stage. Sometimes you learn things. Most times, you just learn new Latin curse words. Add to this the sound of footsteps. Endless footsteps. Rome doesn't have a bedtime. Vendors pack up their stalls well after dark. Soldiers march by on patrol, their hobnailed sandals clacking like an aggressive metronome. Drunks stumble home from the taverns, laughing, weeping, singing, or some potent combination of all three. Every now and then, there's a crash. A cart overturns. A jug breaks. A cat knocks over something important. You shoot upright, heart pounding, and then realize it's just the same amphora that's been falling over for 3 weeks because no one wants to fix the shelf. The walls aren't helping. You can hear everything through them. Every snore, every sneeze, every whispered conversation between 2 people who don't realize they're basically performing for the whole building. You now know that your neighbor Gaius has foot fungus, and that his mother disapproves of his girlfriend. You didn't want to know this, and yet here you are. And just when you think things might be calming down, when the dogs tire themselves out and Titus finally passes out face first in his wine cup, you hear it. The chamber pot. Someone above you empties theirs out the window with the casual grace of a man who believes deeply in gravity and nothing else. You hear the splash. You hear the cave, shouted a moment too late. You lie there, grateful that you don't live on the ground floor, but also a little sad that this is your idea of a silver lining. Eventually, somehow, your brain starts to filter the sounds. The barking fades into background noise. The footsteps become rhythmic. The arguing couple slows their pace. The philosopher slurs into silence. And even the goat settles in for the night, probably curled up next to a stolen sock. You close your eyes and take a deep breath of air that smells like charcoal, fish sauce, and a hint of mildew. It's not peaceful. It's not even quiet. But it's Rome. And this is how the Insula sleeps. Surrounded by noise, embraced by chaos, and gently rocked to sleep by the never-ending lullaby of a city that absolutely refuses to shut up. Good night, Subura. Try not to burn down before breakfast. Your nose awakens before you do. There's a pungent cocktail of baked bread, human waste, spices, sweat, and something possibly dead in the alley. It's like living inside a very confused stew. Welcome to the Subura, the most famously overcrowded, overworked, and aromatically overachieving district in all of ancient Rome. It's a place where smells don't just exist, they compete for dominance. Your olfactory nerves are under siege the moment you crack open an eyelid. Before you've even said salve, your nostrils are already drafting a resignation letter. Let's start with the bread, the one highlight. Somewhere down the street, a baker's been up since before dawn, coaxing loaves out of a fire brick oven. It smells like comfort, warmth, civilization. The moment you catch a whiff of it, you dare to hope that maybe, just maybe, today won't be so bad. That feeling lasts roughly 6 seconds. Because just as the scent of bread rolls gently through your window, it is immediately sucker-punched by the unmistakable aroma of raw sewage. The gutters are open, the sewers are unreliable, and most people still prefer the time-honored tradition of chucking yesterday's chamber pot out the window with a casual cave as warning. If the wind's not in your favor, and it never is, you're inhaling the end result of someone else's fish, stew, and regret. Then there's the fishmonger 2 streets over. He's doing brisk business, but his definition of fresh is elastic. The smell of yesterday's catch, warmed by the Roman sun and lightly seasoned with street dust, hangs in the air like an angry ghost. You can practically taste the scales. Layered over this is the ever-present scent of sweat. Personal hygiene is, shall we say, a community effort. Bathing is a luxury, not a habit. People wear their body odor like an accessory. It's not offensive, it's just Roman. The aroma is part salted laborer, part goat, and part public bathhouse floor. You don't question it, you just blend in. Of course, there's also spice in the air. This is, after all, a trading capital. Vendors hawk everything from cumin to coriander, and the occasional whiff of cinnamon or peppercorn might cut through the stench for a moment of exotic relief. That relief lasts exactly as long as it takes a passing ox to release its own commentary on the matter. But the real wild card, the olfactory roulette of Subura, is whatever's decaying in the alley. There's always something. A pile of cabbage that's lost the will to live. A rat that didn't make it across the cart path. A broken amphora leaking something so pungent it may qualify as a weapon. You pass by and think, ah, so that's where the gods store their vengeance. And yet, somehow, the residents carry on. They walk through the streets like it's perfectly normal to exist in a place that smells like old sandals and spicy doom. Children play in puddles you desperately hope are just rainwater. Bakers sell bread next to leather workers boiling animal hides. Nobody flinches. Smell fatigue is real, and you've reached professional level. Even your own apartment isn't immune. The walls soak up the street like a sponge. Your tunic smells like you've been slow roasted over an open sewer. The straw in your bedding emits a musky scent you politely pretend not to notice. You once tried burning some rosemary to cleanse the air. Your roommate thought you were summoning spirits and hid your sandals for 3 days. You've learned to adapt. You breathe through your mouth. You dab a little oil on your neck to mask the worst of it. You tell yourself the smell is character, grit, authentic Roman ambience. You start to miss it when you visit quieter districts. Clean streets feel sterile, suspicious. Where's the edge? Where's the adrenaline of wondering if that smell is cheese or death? Because the Subura is not subtle. It's not gentle. It doesn't try to hide its aromas behind polite facades. It throws everything at your nose with the confidence of a place that knows it's too big to fail. And strangely, over time, it becomes comforting, familiar, like an old sandal, ugly, smelly, but entirely yours. You know which corners smell like olives and which ones smell like doom. You know which breezes bring bakery air and which ones bring bucket residue. So you stretch, you yawn, you sniff once, wince, and shrug. Another glorious Roman morning. Another day in the stew pot. Time to start your day. Maybe avoid the alley. Maybe don't inhale too deeply near the fish stall. And whatever you do, don't ask what that smell is. In the Subura, it's better not to know. Gossip isn't just entertainment, it's how you stay alive. Someone knows someone whose cousin saw the baker bribe the magistrate. You'd better listen, because that gossip might save you from drinking bad wine or stepping in political drama. In ancient Rome, especially in the overstuffed sardine tin that is your Insula, gossip isn't idle chatter, it's infrastructure. It's the closest thing to a warning system you've got in a world without newspapers, public service announcements, or a helpful "avoid this plague" sign on the corner. If you want to avoid expired cheese, angry tax collectors, or a surprise arrest for insulting the emperor's haircut, you'd better keep your ears open and your mouth selectively closed. And where do you get your daily dose of crucial intel? Not from stone tablets or town criers. You get it from Flavia next door, who has never once minded her own business, and somehow knows everything before it even happens. She is the oracle of apartment 3B. She doesn't spread rumors, she predicts them. This morning she tells you that the wine vendor down the street was seen diluting his amphorae with ditch water again. That's good to know, because the last time you drank his stuff, your stomach tried to start a coup. You make a mental note to switch wine vendors and thank Flavia with the most sacred of Roman gifts, a fresh fig and a mildly impressed grunt. Gossip in the Subura is rapid fire, detail heavy, and 40% true. The remaining 60% doesn't need to be accurate, it just needs to be useful. Like a whisper that the upstairs neighbor's goat got loose again, and that's why your laundry smells like livestock. Or the news that the landlord was seen bribing the building inspector with a wheel of cheese and a wink, which explains why. Your ceiling is still technically attached with rope and hope. But it's not just about knowing what's happening, it's about knowing when to pretend you didn't. For example, you hear that Marcus the grain seller is watering down his flour with ground chalk. You say nothing. Not because you don't care, but because Marcus's cousin is a city official, and you enjoy having knees that bend the correct direction. Still, the information spreads. Quietly, strategically. You tell your roommate in a whisper while pretending to complain about the weather. Your roommate tells her cousin while passing the lentils. The cousin mentions it casually during a bathhouse conversation with a woman who once dated a senator. By sundown, Marcus's stall is mysteriously empty, and a new seller with suspiciously similar eyebrows has taken his place. Sometimes, gossip isn't even spoken. It's performed. A dramatic eye roll, a shared look, a suspicious cough when someone enters the room. You learn to read the subtext like it's carved into marble. Did you hear? Can mean anything from someone's cheating to the garum is off again. And occasionally the stakes are higher than bad wine. Sometimes it's political. A whisper about a magistrate's secret dealings. A soldier who's been asking too many questions. A patrician's name spoken with a little too much sarcasm. You don't repeat those. You just nod slowly, look thoughtful, and change the subject to something safer like gladiator hairstyles or how many pigeons you saw fighting over bread this morning. Because while gossip is a lifeline, it's also a minefield. Say the wrong thing to the wrong person, and you're not just socially awkward, you're on a watch list. The wrong rumor at the wrong time can cost you your business, your apartment, or your spot in the public breadline. But when used correctly, gossip is power. You know which baker is stingy with the sesame seeds. You know which laundry worker accidentally dyes everything pink. You know the widow in Unit 4C has been storing something under her floorboards that definitely doesn't smell like olives. You know the soldier who always lets people pass through the checkpoint if you compliment his calves. And you pass it all along not because you're meddling, but because you're helping. It's communal survival. It's neighborly strategy. It's the ancient Roman version of a group chat, except with more eye contact and fewer emojis. So you listen, you nod, you never dismiss a whisper, no matter how absurd, because that whisper might keep you from eating spoiled lentils or sitting next to the guy who thinks bathing is a conspiracy. In the Subura, gossip isn't just noise, it's news, it's armor. It's the only reason you haven't accidentally insulted a senator's mistress or walked into a tax audit wearing last year's tunic. So when Flavia leans in with a gleam in her eye and says, "You didn't hear this from me," but you stop stirring your stew and you listen. Your survival depends on it. Walking to work, dodge carts, runaway goats, and puddles that are definitely not water. The streets are chaos with a dash of livestock. Sidewalks? Optional. Sanity? Questionable. Your morning commute through ancient Rome is less of a journey and more of a gladiator-style obstacle course. Except instead of spears and lions, Your enemies are mystery fluids, territorial chickens, and extremely enthusiastic fishmongers. You leave your insula with hope in your heart and regret in your sandals, which are already damp with something you sincerely pray is just morning dew. Spoiler. It's not. The streets of the Subura are alive, and not in a poetic, charming way. They are literally alive, with rats, stray dogs, and the occasional snake trying to mind its own business before someone screams and turns it into soup. The cobblestones beneath your feet are slick with centuries of wear, soot, and an eternal layer of grime that no one can quite identify. There are no sanitation crews. If something spills, it just becomes part of the road. And oh, the spills. Chamber pots get emptied from second-story windows without warning. You learn to listen for the telltale shout of cave, a Latin word that means heads up, and roughly translates to move now or be christened in someone's dinner leftovers. That mysterious trickle running along the curb? That's not rainwater. That's the city's unofficial plumbing system. You step over it like your life depends on it. Because it does. The traffic situation is, frankly, legendary. Carts pulled by oxen, donkeys, or extremely angry men trundle by at unpredictable speeds. The wheels squeak, the drivers yell. The animals seem vaguely drunk. There are no traffic laws. There's barely space to walk. You press yourself against a wall to avoid a speeding vegetable vendor, only to be immediately elbowed by a woman, balancing 6 jugs of garum and a personal vendetta. The sidewalks, if you can call them that, are narrow and mostly symbolic. They exist purely to give you a false sense of hope before they disappear under a pile of bricks or someone's drying laundry. More often than not, you end up walking in the middle of the street, dodging carts and pretending not to notice the guy, relieving himself behind a pillar. And then there are the goats. There are always goats. No one knows where they come from or who they belong to. They are feral. They are fearless. They will look you dead in the eye as they chew on someone's toga and block the entire road. You try to walk around them. They follow you. You break into a jog. So do they. You give up and let them lead the way. They seem to know where they're going. Vendors line the streets yelling about their wares. Fresh dates. Warm bread. Spices from the east. Slightly dented olives. Everyone's shouting. No one's listening. One guy tries to sell you a roasted dormouse wrapped in honey and sesame seeds. You decline. He calls you a barbarian. Someone bumps into you and tries to sell you insurance for falling roof tiles. You laugh until a tile crashes onto the street 10 feet away and shatters like divine punctuation. You make a mental note to never stand under balconies again, or trust that your upstairs neighbor's flower pot isn't out for blood. You pass by a fountain with a short line of women filling jugs. They're gossiping loudly about a senator's love life and the price of anchovies. You eavesdrop, of course. It's called survival. A particularly juicy tidbit nearly distracts you from the steaming pile of horse droppings directly in your path. You sidestep at the last second and feel the distinct squelch of something almost worse. You try not to think about it. Finally, after dodging 3 near collisions, 2 public arguments, and a runaway cart full of turnips, you arrive at your destination, a small workshop, market stall, or public office, depending on your luck and whether your boss remembered to show up today. You're sweaty, slightly bruised, and smell faintly of fermented fish sauce and goat panic. But you made it. You survived the commute, and now all you have to do is survive the rest of the day. Good luck. The goats are watching. He's a musician, but not a good one. He practices at dawn, plays the pan flute, and sometimes sings, loudly, naked. You've filed a complaint, but the building's complaint box is also the firewood pile. In other words, welcome to Insula Living Rome's finest example of communal suffering wrapped in wooden beams and questionable architecture. Your upstairs neighbor, let's call him Publius, is a man of passion, poor pitch, and even worse timing. He believes himself to be the next great entertainer of the empire. The rest of the insula believes he's some sort of auditory punishment from the gods. Publius begins his performances at sunrise, just as the rooster 3 roofs over starts crowing. Only, the rooster is on beat. Publius is not. The pan flute emerges from above like a dying reed goose trapped in a chimney. He warms up with something that might be a folk tune, or might be a summoning ritual, no one is quite sure. The notes bounce off the crumbling plaster and into your skull like tiny musical daggers. Then comes the vocal portion. This consists of dramatic, vibrato-heavy howling, often accompanied by interpretive stomping and a rhythmic thumping that suggests he's also learning the tambourine with his feet. The lyrics? Either deeply poetic or entirely made up. You caught one stanza that seemed to rhyme olive with dove dive, followed by a prolonged scream that might have been the climax, or just a stubbed toe. And yes, he's frequently naked. Not in a forgot to put on pants way, no. In a this helps me connect with my muse way, which means your ceiling occasionally trembles not just from his dancing, but from the terrifying awareness that he is freely flailing in the nude, just meters above your straw-stuffed mattress. You consider moving. You also consider setting your ears on fire. You've tried everything. You pounded on the ceiling with a broom handle. He assumed it was applause. You tried talking to him. He said he doesn't believe in criticism from the unawakened. You left a note. He used the back of it to sketch a diagram for a new breathing technique and tacked it to the stairwell bulletin board next to an ad for eel massage. You tried filing a complaint with the building manager who, to be fair, is a goat that lives on the 3rd floor and sometimes eats scrolls. The actual human landlord lives in a villa on the coast and hasn't visited in 6 years. The complaint box was once a crate nailed to the wall. It's since been repurposed for kindling during last winter's accidental fire. And yet, somehow, Publius remains. Immovable. Eternal. Like mold, but louder. The worst part? He thinks he's doing everyone a favor. He believes that his music brings balance to the communal soul. Once, during Saturnalia, he performed a full concert in the shared courtyard. Half the audience left after the first song. The other half fell asleep. One man claimed temporary blindness. Publius called it a triumph. When you see him in the stairwell, he greets you with a serene smile and asks if you felt the harmonics from yesterday's sunrise set. You did, in your teeth. He offers to give you lessons. You consider jumping out the window, but it's only the 2nd floor and you've already sprained your ankle this month. At one point, you banded together with the downstairs neighbor, who ironically is a tanner and smells like boiled leather and vengeance. The two of you plotted a noise counter-offensive, pots, pans, and aggressive broom percussion at 3 a.m. Unfortunately, Publius joined in, believing it was an experimental duet. There is no winning. There is only endurance. Still, in rare moments, usually when he's out foraging for river reeds or having a spiritual breakthrough in the bathhouse, you experience silence. Sweet, blissful silence. You can hear the wind rustling through your broken shutters, the distant murmur of a street vendor, the faraway squawk of a pigeon doing pigeon things, and then the pan flute returns. You sigh. You roll over. You stuff a handful of straw in your ears. Because this is insular life, and insular life means living with people, all of them, all the time, including the tone-deaf nudist above you who believes music is more important than modesty or mercy. At least he doesn't play the cymbals. Yet, need lentils? Or sandals? Or a dubious love potion? The forum has it all, plus pickpockets, philosophers, and a fishmonger with no sense of smell. Haggling is mandatory. So is washing your hands after. Welcome to the Roman Forum, your one-stop shop for groceries, gossip, and existential crises. It's not just a marketplace. It's a mosh pit of humanity with olives. Picture an open-air maze of shouting vendors, flailing chickens, suspicious spices, and enough body odor to make the gods weep. You start your journey with a shopping list scratched into a wax tablet if you're fancy. If not, you keep it in your head, right next to the mental note to avoid the cheese stall after what happened last time. Spoiler. It moved on its own. The forum stretches ahead like a festival no one invited you to, but you somehow can't escape. Stalls are arranged in tight, irregular lines, manned by merchants with the vocal power of a Roman general and the patience of a caffeinated squirrel. Each one is convinced their lentils are superior. Every item is rare, just in, or beloved by Caesar himself. You dodge a runaway child carrying a turnip bigger than his torso and immediately sidestep a dog that is very much using a sandal display as a restroom. Standard start to your shopping trip. Your first stop, chickpeas, a staple of the Roman diet. The vendor eyes you with suspicion, mostly because he recognizes you as the person who haggled him down 2 denarii last week by pretending your grandmother had gout. He's not over it. You offer a polite nod and inspect his legumes with an expression that says, "I could go somewhere else." He caves. You walk away with a bag of chickpeas, your pride intact, and only minor emotional bruising. Next, sandals. Yours are falling apart, mostly because Roman streets are 60% stone, 30% mystery sludge, and 10% goat debris. You approach the sandal maker, who's already talking about limited edition gladiator soles, and trying to upsell you on a matching leather headband. You pretend to admire the stitching while doing mental math to see if you can afford it without skipping dinner. Then you hear it. That unmistakable hawking cry. Love. Potions. Real ones. Guaranteed or mildly disappointing. You turn, and there he is. The potion guy. He's wearing 6 necklaces, a tunic with questionable stains, and the wide, glassy-eyed stare of someone who drinks his own inventory. He offers you a small vial filled with something that looks like spoiled wine and something that smells like vinegar, crushed violets and regret. You decline. He offers a loyalty discount. You decline again. He says the potion once worked on a Vestal virgin. You walk away. Just as you're about to inspect some dried figs, a robed man with wild hair grabs your elbow and starts loudly explaining the meaning of life. He's a street philosopher. Common species. Do not engage. You smile, nod vaguely, and slowly rotate away while pretending to sneeze into your tunic. He moves on to a nearby melon vendor. You're safe for now. But the danger isn't over. Because the pickpockets are always watching. You check your coin pouch. Still there. You feel smug. Then you check again. Still there. Even smugger. You're halfway through a triumphant mental victory lap when you realize they didn't take your coins, they took your lentils. You look around. No culprit in sight. Just a sea of tunics and smug, lentil-fed expressions. You sigh. You'll have to go back to the legume stall and endure that vendor's victorious smirk. Still, it's not all pain. Sometimes you stumble on something genuinely useful. A set of good amphorae, fresh honeycomb. A spice cellar from Syria with saffron so golden it makes you believe in love again. And occasionally, a bard who doesn't sound like a goat being strangled. Eventually your arms are full, your feet hurt, your wallet is lighter, and your sense of personal space has been thoroughly violated by 3 chickens, 2 vendors, and something that might have been a ferret. You escape the forum through a side alley, dodging a man selling scrolls with erotic poetry and another one yelling about end times, prophecies involving flaming ducks. Standard stuff. Once home, you unpack your haul. Chickpeas, reacquired. A bundle of wilted greens. 2 sandals that almost match. And something the potion guy slipped into your basket that you definitely did not ask for. You sit down, wipe your brow, and marvel at your own survival. You faced the forum and lived. Tomorrow you'll have to go back for meat. But that's a whole different nightmare. One with hooves and opinions. Rats are a fact of life. They're fast, bold, and occasionally unionized. They eat your food, sleep in your bed, and once, one stole your cheese and left a fig in exchange. It felt personal. Welcome to Insula living where your real roommates aren't your family, but the whiskered, squeaking, 4-legged freeloaders you didn't sign up for. These aren't shy little field mice. These are Roman rats. Streetwise, aggressive, and weirdly charismatic. They've seen things, survived things, probably paid taxes. You don't just have a rat problem. You have a community of rats. A thriving, well-established society of rodents that exists entirely in your walls, under your floor, and sometimes, disconcertingly, in your laundry basket. At night, they party. At dawn, they nap in your firewood pile. During the day, they linger in the corners of your vision like tiny, hairy house gods who demand tribute in the form of bread crusts and loose grains. Your first mistake was leaving out that bit of barley last week. A rat found it. Then he came back with friends. Now you're running a very informal soup kitchen for rodents who've decided your insula is basically a rat resort. You once woke up to one sitting calmly in your dish bowl like it had reserved a table. They're bold, these rats. You lock up your food in a hanging basket. They climb the walls. You hide your cheese in a ceramic pot with a lid. They lift it. You spend half an hour setting a trap with a bit of salted pork. They steal the bait, leave you a pebble, and flip the trap over as a power move. And they don't limit themselves to your apartment. The whole building is infested. Everyone's got a theory. Some say they come from the bakery. Others blame the communal latrine. One guy swears they're being summoned by a curse from an ex-girlfriend who now sells perfumes. Everyone agrees they're unstoppable. And the sounds? Oh, the sounds. Tiny scurrying claws across your beams in the middle of the night. The delicate chewing of your emergency fig stash. The sudden, stomach-turning thump of something falling over on its own. Was it a rat? Or the ceiling collapsing again? You lie there in bed, paralyzed, blanket pulled to your chin like it'll protect you from rodents with ambition. You once tried to trap one in a clay pot. It escaped by chewing through the wall. You blocked the hole. It made a new one. Now there's a rat-sized doorway in your apartment, and honestly, you're starting to respect the craftsmanship. Your neighbor claims to have tamed one, calls it Brutus, swears it can fetch coins and sit on command. You're not sure what's more alarming, that the rat is trained, or that your neighbor seems to have built a better relationship with a rodent than with his own wife. Of course, the city authorities aren't much help. If you complain, you're told to store food higher or get a cat. First of all, the rats are higher than the food. Second, the last cat that showed up joined them. You saw it sharing a dead bird with a particularly large rat that looked like it bench presses amphorae for fun. And then there's the rat who returned your cheese. Sort of. You'd been saving that cheese. A little square of something soft and salty. You went to bed dreaming of it. Woke up and it was gone. In its place, a dried fig. Not even a good fig. It was wrinkled, slightly mouldy, but still, an exchange had been made. A trade. A message. Was it a rat offering you peace? A mistake? A challenge. Are you now part of a bartering system? You don't know. You don't want to know. At this point, you've learned to cohabitate. You tap your bowl before eating. Shake out your tunic before putting it on. You mutter, "Excuse me," before reaching into your grain jar, just in case someone's napping in there. It's not ideal, but it's Rome. Some nights, as you listen to them rustling and squeaking in the walls, you imagine them having meetings, discussing routes, assigning missions, debating whether to chew through your sandal or your curtain next. You no longer live with rats, you live under them. Because in the great hierarchy of Roman insular survival, the rats may not pay rent, but they sure run the place. Rome is either scorching or soaked. Summer turns your insula into a brick oven. Winter leaks through the walls like a disappointed ghost. There's no thermostat, only complaints and damp tunics. Welcome to the Roman climate, where the weather swings. Between furnace with a side of wasps and soggy plague invitation, there is no mild, there is no pleasant, there is only suffering in seasonal flavors. Let's begin with summer. The sun comes up angry and stays mad all day. Your insula, made of sun-baked bricks and moral compromise, absorbs heat like a sponge and radiates it directly into your living space. It's not so much indoors as it is slow cooking from the inside. You wake up drenched in sweat and somehow, mysteriously, already sunburned. You crack a window for relief, only to be met with a gust of hot air that smells like fish guts and despair. Flies buzz around like they own the place, which, to be fair, they kind of do. You fan yourself with a bit of parchment that used to be a tax notice and hope it doesn't burst into flames from friction. There's no shade in the forum, no AC in the bathhouse, and your tunic clings to you like a desperate ex. The communal fountain becomes a mob scene by noon. You go to dip your hands in, and 5 sweaty elbows beat you to it. Someone's already thrown a fish in to cool off. You're not sure if it's dead or just relaxing. At night, it doesn't cool down. The heat simply changes shape from blinding sunlight to a sticky, inescapable humidity that wraps around you like a damp toga of suffering. You try to sleep. You fail. You lie motionless, listening to the distant sound of someone else's donkey having a heat-induced breakdown. And of course, the pan flute. Always the pan flute. But then winter arrives, and it's somehow worse. Because Roman winters aren't majestic or crisp. They're damp, grey, and cold in a way that feels deeply personal. Your walls leak, your ceiling drips, your floorboards sigh, your bed straw gets wet and never dries. You light a fire and it immediately chokes you with smoke because your chimney is more decorative than functional. You wrap yourself in every blanket you own, which is two. You still shiver. Your nose runs. Your fingers go numb. Your breath fogs in front of your face. You try to warm yourself by the stove, but there's no fuel left. You eye your neighbor's broken chair and consider a small crime. Outside, the streets turn to mush. The gutters overflow. The stepping stones disappear under icy puddles of slush and horse droppings. You trudge through them anyway, tunic sticking to your knees, clutching a basket of wilted greens and wondering if toes are optional. The wind, meanwhile, seems to exist solely to punish you. It sneaks through cracks in your walls. It howls like a banshee with unpaid debts. It overturns your laundry, slams shutters, and once launched your neighbor's wig into a bakery. And then there's the real horror. Roman rain. When it rains in Rome, it doesn't politely drizzle. It attacks. It slaps your face sideways and comes from a direction that makes no meteorological sense. One moment, you're strolling to the Forum. The next, you're drenched head to toe and trying to wring out your socks in someone's doorway. The streets flood instantly, the latrines back up. The air smells like betrayal. You return home soaked, miserable, and slightly feral. You strip off your tunic, which now weighs 15 pounds, and hang it near the hearth. It drips for the next 3 days. Your sandals squelch when you walk. You consider becoming a hermit. There is, of course, no indoor heating. Romans don't believe in such luxuries. If you want warmth, you sit near a brazier and pray you don't knock it over in your sleep. Carbon monoxide poisoning is a feature, not a bug. Fire safety remains a theory, not a practice. Every season, every storm, every sunbeam feels like it's trying to personally sabotage your life. You start planning your outfits based not on comfort, but on which fabrics dry fastest. You develop a sixth sense for rain. You sniff the air and mutter, "It's coming," like a weather-beaten sailor. People respect you for it. Sort of. And yet, you adapt. You sweat. You freeze. You grumble. But you survive. Because this is Rome, this is insular life. The walls may be cracked, but they still stand. The ceiling may drip, but it mostly stays up. And your neighbor may be half naked and yelling about Jupiter, but at least he shares his firewood. You throw on your tunic still damp. You step outside still raining. You squint up at the sky and sigh. Another beautiful day in the eternal city. Is your neighbor sneezing too much? Jupiter might be angry. People wear amulets, draw symbols in ash, and sacrifice birds. If something goes wrong, it's always Mercury's fault, or that one guy who never bathes. In ancient Rome, religion isn't just a part of life, it is life. It's not something you think about on feast days or mutter about before bed. No, it's baked into your routine like olives in bad bread. Everything has divine meaning. Your plants died? Probably the wrath of Ceres. Tripped on the stairs? Clearly a message from Mars. Stubbed your toe and swore? Congratulations, you've just offended at least 3 minor household gods, and possibly your upstairs neighbor's grandmother, who swears she's descended from Venus. Romans don't just believe in gods. They believe in all the gods, and household spirits, and street spirits, and crossroads spirits, and probably a few mold spirits for good measure. You can't sneeze, stub your toe, or burn your lentils without assuming you've triggered divine retribution. There's a ritual for everything, and a curse for everyone, including you. Superstition is the neighborhood's unofficial currency. You don't just sweep your doorway, you sweep it in the right direction. You never say the word fire out loud inside your insula unless you want to wake up in the forum wearing only smoke and disappointment. You avoid black dogs, oddly shaped clouds, and that one olive vendor who always smells like sulfur and unfinished business. But nothing beats the chicken guts. Need to make a decision? Planning a business deal? Thinking of traveling or finally confronting the musician upstairs about his dawn pan flute sessions? First, consult the Auspex Rome's elite team of bird watchers/fortune tellers. They observe the sky, study bird flight patterns, and most importantly, they cut open chickens. Yes, chickens. And not in a casual Sunday dinner sort of way. In a deeply spiritual, slightly unsettling, let's all crowd around and look at the spleen kind of way. They examine the entrails with the solemnity of a priest reading scripture and the intensity of a man trying to find his keys in a bowl of spaghetti. Is the liver misshapen? Cancel the trip. Are the intestines slightly off color? Reschedule your wedding. Did the chicken look at you funny before it met its fate? Mercury's watching. Be careful. Of course, not everyone can afford a professional chicken reader, so people take matters into their own hands. You've seen your neighbor burn a feather and whisper to a cracked pot. The fishmonger keeps a lucky eel in a jar. Your cousin swears by a homemade talisman made of garlic, bone fragments, and something that suspiciously resembles pigeon toenails. And everyone has an opinion on which gods are currently mad. If there's a drought, it's probably Vesta. If someone falls down a well, Neptune's involved. If prices go up at the market, Mercury is pulling strings. Or at least that's what the butcher says as he pockets an extra denarius. The guy next door? He's convinced Bacchus is angry because someone watered down the wine at last week's party. To stay safe, you participate in rituals. Lots of them. You toss salt over your shoulder. You mutter protective phrases. You hang little bronze charms shaped like fists, phalluses, or pine cones, because nothing says divine protection like confusing symbolism and questionable decor. You leave offerings, wine, bread, honey cakes. You once saw someone leave a roasted dormouse on a shrine. It was gone by morning. You're still not sure if the gods were pleased, or if a rat got to it first. Either way, everyone's happy. Festivals are a different beast entirely. Lupercalia, Saturnalia, and all the rest involve processions, costumes, drinking, and rituals that blur the line between devotion and public nuisance. You join in, of course, not because you're particularly religious, but because refusing might result in divine pestilence or your neighbor accusing you of being cursed. And that's the real danger, being the cursed one. If your roof leaks, your goats get sick, or your bread won't rise, people start whispering, "She didn't bless her hearth." He looked at the augur sideways. That one time I heard him say Jupiter was overrated. Soon, someone's drawing protective symbols in front of your door, and the local kids refuse to make eye contact. You burn extra incense, offer more honey, and hope the gods, or at least your neighbors, take the hint. In a city of crumbling tenements, sketchy stairs, and suspicious stew, superstition is a survival strategy. You don't have running water or reliable roofing, but you do have an amulet, a chant for warding off curses, and a general understanding that if something bad happens, it's probably your fault for not sacrificing a chicken last Tuesday. Because in Rome, you don't just believe in luck. You bribe it with breadcrumbs, burnt feathers, and whatever's left of your dignity. And sometimes, it works. Your apartment could go up in flames because someone overcooked lentils 2 floors down. Fires spread fast. There are no fire trucks. There's just yelling, buckets, and blind panic. Sleep well. In a Roman insula, fire isn't just a danger, it's a lifestyle. It's the crackling, smoky, ever-present threat that whispers, "You didn't really like that roof, did you?" The moment you hear someone say, "Oops," you stop what you're doing and sniff the air. Is it just burnt bread or the beginning of another insular, wide bonfire? The buildings are stacked high, built quickly, and stuffed full of flammable things like straw bedding, wooden beams, and dreams. If you live on the top floor, congratulations, you're closer to the gods, but also closest to the crispy finale. If you live on the bottom floor, you have the best chance of escape. You're also directly under 7 amateur cooks, 2 drunk candle jugglers, and 1 guy who insists his stove never tips over right before it does. There are no smoke detectors, no emergency exits, no little red pull stations on the wall, just you, your nose, and the faint hope that someone in the building owns a bucket. The official Roman firefighting strategy? Scream, throw water in the general direction of the blaze, and maybe blame your neighbor's goat. Most Roman fires start innocently enough. A dropped oil lamp, a charcoal, pit that was definitely out but wasn't. A cooking fire left too long while someone got distracted by a street fight or a passing parade. Once it starts, the fire doesn't politely ask permission. It races up the wooden stairs, dances through the lath and plaster walls, and leaps across rooftops like it's late for a festival. You'd think the city would be better prepared. Rome does technically have firefighters vigiles, but they're less emergency responders and more semi-motivated night watchmen with buckets. They show up eventually. Usually. Sometimes. If they're not sleeping, gambling, or arguing over who used the last of the vinegar to clean the tools. And even when they do arrive, they have to carry water from a public fountain 3 blocks away. By the time they get there, the fire has already packed up, moved on, and taken half the neighborhood with it. You try to stay ready. You keep your valuables near the door. A chipped bowl, a worn sandal, and a figurine of Mercury with a nose that fell off in the last quake. You sleep in your tunic just in case. And if you hear someone shout, "Ignis," you don't wait. You grab your stuff, yell something equally dramatic, and bolt for the stairs, which were already questionable before they were coated in smoke and panic. The real chaos, though, is the neighbors. Everyone has their own plan. Some run out the front, some climb onto the roof. One guy jumps out the window every time, even if it's a drill. You once saw a woman trying to rescue her soup pot before her children. She had priorities. And of course, there's always someone who thinks they can fight the fire with sheer optimism and a damp rag. That person usually becomes a cautionary tale told at dinner the next week if there's still a dinner table left. Post-fire recovery is a mess. If your apartment's gone, you move in with relatives, or find another insula with a slightly lower chance of spontaneous combustion. Insurance doesn't exist, unless you count hoping the landlord notices as a policy. Spoiler, he won't. He lives in a villa on the coast and hasn't visited the property since Tiberius was a toddler. So instead, the city rebuilds. And by rebuilds, we mean hastily patches together another wooden fire trap and rents it out before the ashes cool. There are laws against using flammable materials. There are also laws about taxes, building permits, and street theatre permits, all equally ignored. Meanwhile, the superstition kicks in. Someone offers a sacrifice to Vulcan, god of fire. Someone else accuses the fishmonger of summoning flames through an unholy pact. A child finds a slightly burned amulet and declares it lucky. Life resumes. You rebuild your life. Again, new tunic. New bedroll. Slightly melted cooking pot. A deep philosophical understanding that your life is always one lentil away from disaster. And yet you stay. Because Rome is home. Fire is just part of the deal. You laugh about it later, over charred bread and gossip. You make jokes about how the heat improved your complexion. You hang a garlic braid over your door, just in case. And you definitely keep your sandals near your bed. Because in a Roman insula, you never know when it's going to be your turn to roast. You can't afford a dog, but you've got a chicken named Claudia. She lays eggs, pecks at your toes, and once chased a rat out of your pantry. She is your emotional support poultry. And in ancient Rome, that's not even the strangest part of your domestic life. Chickens are more than just breakfast suppliers. They're pest control, alarm systems, low-maintenance companions, and, in Claudia's case, your only housemate who doesn't talk in their sleep or sing loudly at dawn while naked. Claudia is reliable. Claudia is brave. Claudia once stared down a snake and won. You found her at the forum wedged in a basket between a bundle of leeks and a bored-looking fish. You didn't mean to get a chicken. You were looking for lentils. but there was something in her eye, a defiance, a glint of stubborn wisdom. You paid 2 denarii, gave her a piece of bread, and brought her home in your tunic. Since then, she's become a fixture in your apartment. She roosts in the corner, occasionally on your laundry pile. She clucks loudly when someone comes up the stairs, a more reliable warning system than any door bolt. She pecks intruders, real or imagined, and once even bit a visiting tax collector on the ankle. You apologized. Claudia did not. And yes, technically you could eat her, but you won't. She's family now. In Rome, chickens are everywhere, roaming courtyards, strutting through market stalls, occasionally sitting in magistrates' laps during long speeches. True story. Most people keep them for eggs, some for meat, and a few, like you, for companionship and rat defense. Claudia performs all 3 roles, though you've tactfully not mentioned that last one to her. You've even seen people bring chickens into temples. Not as sacrifices, just guests. Sacred hens, divining hens, emotional support hens. If it's got feathers and clucks, someone thinks it's connected to the gods. In fact, Roman augurs often interpret omens based on how chickens eat. If they gobble greedily, it's a good sign. If they refuse food, disaster looms. Claudia once refused a grain of barley, and your upstairs neighbor fell through the ceiling the next day. Coincidence? You don't think so. She's also surprisingly political. Or at least, she's been present during several heated arguments about grain prices. She doesn't take sides, but she does peck your cousin when he starts talking nonsense, which, frankly, is more effective than most senators. But Claudia's not just useful, she's company. When the Insula creaks and the wind howls through the shutters, she settles beside you like a warm, slightly judgmental pillow. When your lentils burn or your sandal strap snaps, she tilts her head as if to say, "Again? Really?" When everything else feels like it's falling apart, she clucks softly, hops into your lap, and reminds you that at least one living creature in your home isn't trying to sing, steal, or spontaneously combust. Of course, not everyone understands. Your neighbor complains about feathers in the stairwell. The landlord once mumbled something about no livestock, but you pointed out that Claudia is smarter than at least 3 other tenants and doesn't owe back rent. The kids in the courtyard tease you until Claudia chases them, wings flapping, beak wide, the picture of tiny fury. She is feared, she is respected. You've made her a little necklace out of string and a bead you found behind the amphora. She wore it proudly for 3 days before eating it. You've written songs about her. You even taught her to come when called unless there's something shinier in the opposite direction. One time, a traveling merchant offered to buy her, said she looked robust. You stared him down, clutching Claudia to your chest like she was a sacred relic. He backed away slowly. Because here's the thing, in a crumbling fire, prone building full of rodents, rumors, and roommates with questionable hygiene, Claudia is a miracle. She's a reminder that something in your life is working. She gives you breakfast, she gives you peace, she gives you sass. And, let's be honest, she's the only living creature in your home that hasn't woken you up by loudly reciting Virgil at 4 a.m. So no, you're not just a person with a chicken, you're a chicken person. A proud member of Rome's growing population of citizens who understand that sometimes the best friend you can have is one that lays eggs and doesn't judge your laundry pile. Give her a scratch behind the wing. Let her steal one grape. And when the fire starts, the rain pours, or the neighbor starts singing again, hold Claudia close. She's got your back. Got trash? Just toss it out the window. That's what everyone else is doing. The street below is a communal compost heap. Just don't be standing there when someone tosses their old stew. In a Roman insula, there is no such thing as a sanitation system, unless you count gravity and bad aim. There are no garbage bins, no collection schedules, and absolutely no neighborhood associations to complain to. Your window is your trash chute, and the street? That's everyone's shared dumpster, latrine, and compost pile, all rolled into one. You don't have room inside your apartment for waste. You barely have room for people. There's no back alley to sneak off to, and there are certainly no servants wandering around with tidy carts and a song in their hearts. If something's rotting, broken, leaking, or used up, there's only one solution. Open the shutters and send it flying. You'd think people might be discreet. Maybe do it at night. Maybe check if anyone's walking by. But no, this is Rome. People yell cave, which roughly means heads up, and then launch a cascade of scraps, bones, and mysterious liquids into the street with all the elegance of a toddler throwing spaghetti. It's not a warning. It's a courtesy. A minimal, often too late kind of courtesy. Walking beneath windows is an extreme sport. You duck instinctively whenever someone opens their shutters. You learn to listen for the telltale clatter of a pot being scraped clean. You've seen people get hit with fish heads, leftover stew, and once, an entire chicken carcass. Still warm. The streets themselves tell a story. Crushed vegetables, wilted greens, eggshells, old sandals, a doll's arm, possibly a cursed amulet. It's all there, slowly dissolving into a thick sludge that flows downhill, mixing with animal waste and public restroom runoff in a way that is both poetic and profoundly unsanitary. And the smell? Imagine a stew made from bad decisions, last month's lunch, wet straw and shame. It sticks to your sandals, it climbs up your tunic, it enters your soul. You could wear a garland of lavender and still smell like fermented soup by the time you get home. But what choice do you have? You're not going to keep trash in your apartment. It's already full of half-dry laundry, your cousin's broken harp, and a suspicious jug of something labelled, not vinegar, probably. The corner where you used to store waste now belongs to Claudia the chicken. She pecks aggressively if you get too close. So you throw it out the window. Food scraps, burnt bread, bits of broken pottery. You once threw out an entire sandal that disintegrated mid-commute. It landed on a passing donkey. The donkey was unbothered. The cart driver? Less so. Even worse are the neighbours who don't throw out their trash. They hoard it. They let it pile up in baskets, hoping for a better solution that never comes. And eventually they too cave literally and dump 3 days' worth of compost out the window all at once, triggering a localized landslide of vegetable peels and something that might once have been a turnip. There's also the bucket and chuck crowd. These are the bold souls who skip the food scraps entirely and go straight for liquid waste chamber pots, cleaning water, fermented bath leftovers. They toss it with a practiced flair, like they're auditioning for the role of worst neighbor ever. You learn quickly to walk close to the middle of the street, where the splash radius is marginally smaller. It's not safe, just statistically safer. To deal with the mess, Rome employs street cleaners known as scoparii, but they're outnumbered, underpaid, and armed with nothing but brooms and 1,000-yard stares. They do what they can. They clear paths. They nudge piles of refuse into gutters, where it slowly forms into a kind of primordial soup that feeds the local rat population and challenges the gods to a sniff test. Ironically, some Romans claim this all keeps the streets alive, full of movement, noise, and earthy smells. It's the soul of the Subura, your neighbor once said as she chucked a bucket of onion peels onto your sandal. It's tradition. You're pretty sure it's also a health hazard, but try arguing that while gagging. And yet, you adjust. You time your walks carefully. You teach Claudia to cluck when a window creaks. You develop a sixth sense for falling stew. Because in Rome, if the roof doesn't collapse and the rats don't riot, then the trash will find you, and probably hit you in the face. On the bright side, at least you don't have to take it out to the curb. If you're on the bottom floor, congrats, you're practically nobility. You've got thick walls, fewer stairs, and slightly less chance of dying in a fire. If you're on the top floor, may the gods be with you. In the Roman Insula, social status isn't measured in wealth, titles, or togas. It's measured in how many stairs you have to climb before collapsing into your straw mattress. The closer you live to the street, the fancier you are. The higher up you go, the less Rome thinks you matter. Which is ironic, considering you have the best view of the city's chaos from up there right before the roof caves in. Let's start at the bottom. The ground floor. The sweet, sacred, earth-level paradise. If you live here, you probably have your own entrance. your own latrine, a gift from the gods, and maybe, just maybe, your own tiny cooking area that doesn't double as a death trap. Your walls are made of brick instead of panic and plaster. Your ceiling doesn't leak as much. You can leave your home without risking a stair-induced hernia. And most importantly, you're the last to die in a fire. The ground floor is where the rich tenants live. Not villa rich, mind you. This isn't marble column luxury, but insular rich, the kind of person who owns 2 tunics, a lockable chest, and possibly a cat that hasn't joined the local rat gang. You sleep with both feet on the ground. You laugh softly at the people above you, struggling to carry jars of water up 6 flights while dodging falling sandals and airborne stew. You have a doormat, a real one, woven from reeds, probably hand-me-down from a senator's cousin. You nod smugly when people knock on your door instead of shouting from the street. And if you're really fancy, you have windows with actual shutters, that close, with hinges. But things change as you go higher. The first floor up, still pretty good, maybe a little less privacy, a few more creaks in the walls. You start seeing cracks in the plaster, the occasional mouse, and a growing understanding that the building may or may not have been built by someone with a very flexible idea of straight lines. But you're still in the safety zone. Second floor? Now we're entering working-class optimism. You've got a decent view of the street fights, but your windows no longer close properly. Your water jug leaks. The stairs creak louder. Your neighbor has a goat that doesn't sleep. It stares at you, all the time. By the time you reach the 3rd floor, life has turned into a cardio workout you never signed up for. Every trip home feels like a pilgrimage. Your arms ache from hauling grain. Your knees hate you. And by the time you get up there, half the olive oil has spilled and you've forgotten why you left in the first place. You fall asleep in your tunic, not from laziness, but because removing it might use your last ounce of strength. And then there's the top floor, the rooftop penthouse of despair, the 5th floor, home to poets, drunk uncles, and people whose landlords have forgotten they exist. Up here, your walls are so thin that if your neighbor sneezes, you bless him through sheer instinct. Your roof leaks. Your floor buckles. The rats are bigger. The wind howls like it knows your secrets. You have to shout down the stairwell to be heard, and half the time, your messages arrive via gossip and guesswork. You are, essentially, living in a wooden tinderbox designed by a blind architect with a grudge. If there's a fire, you're toast. If there's a storm, you're wet toast. And if there's an earthquake, just lie down. Accept your fate. Claudia the chicken is already packing. But the most humiliating part? Rent goes down the higher you go. Literally. The worse your apartment is, the cheaper it is because the stairs are so miserable that even poverty needs an incentive. So yes, while the guy below you sleeps soundly on brick walls and solid flooring, you're listening to your ceiling creak and wondering if this is the night it gives out and you fall into his soup. The class divide in a Roman insula isn't subtle. It's vertical. It's physical. It's measured in groaning floorboards and the smell of your neighbor's feet wafting up through the cracks. And every time someone on the 1st floor complains about noise, you try to remind yourself not to respond by hurling your chamber pot. But despite it all, you survive. You climb the stairs. You carry your water. You brace for leaks and brace for impact, because this is Rome. And even in the sky-high oven that is your top floor cubicle of suffering, you're part of the greatest city the world has ever seen. Even if your ceiling is sagging, and possibly on fire, you haven't bathed in days, but neither has anyone else. You mask the stench with olive oil and herbs. Still, if you smell worse than the fish vendor, people talk. It's a low bar, but it exists. Welcome to the strange, sweaty world of ancient Roman personal hygiene, where cleanliness is next to godliness, but only on feast days, and deodorant is anything you can smear under your arms without catching fire. You do your best, truly. You scrub with what's available. You oil yourself like a roast goose. You even try to keep your tunic relatively free of suspicious stains. But the truth is, hygiene in a Roman insula is more of a vibe than a result. Let's be clear, Romans cared about cleanliness. They wrote poems about it. They built massive public bathhouses. They had strong opinions about how often one should scrape one's skin with a curved bronze tool called a strigil, which is basically a combination squeegee and self-respect. But for people like you, living in a crowded tenement full of rats, shouting, and structural uncertainty, personal hygiene is more about strategy than scrubbing. Your daily routine goes something like this. Wake up in a haze of neighbor sweat and goat breath. Splash your face with a bit of rainwater caught in a broken pot, and apply olive oil mixed with crushed herbs, probably lavender or whatever looked least chewed at the market. Then, if you're feeling ambitious, scrape the oil off with your strigil. If you're not, just pat it down and call it a sheen. This is not luxury, this is survival, because while everyone smells, there are degrees of stink. And once you hit a certain level, once you cross the invisible but very real olfactory line between, oh, that's just Rome, and dear Jupiter, what died, you become a topic of discussion. Your neighbor on the second floor? He wears a pine cone tied around his neck, claims it masks odors. In reality, it smells like wet bark and misplaced confidence. The old woman downstairs washes her feet in wine. Not the good kind. And not because it works, because she once heard that Cleopatra did it, and that's all she needed. Even Claudia the chicken gets a dust bath in the alley every few days. She's cleaner than you, and somehow everyone knows it. And yes, there are bathhouses, the thermae. They're big, beautiful, and full of naked strangers, discussing philosophy while scrubbing their thighs. But they cost money, and time, and dignity. You can't just pop in for a quick rinse. It's an event. You have to wait in line. Avoid making eye contact with the one guy who insists on stretching theatrically, and pray the water isn't hosting a small ecosystem. When you do go, you bring your own oil, your own towel, and, if you're wise, a friend to guard your sandals so they don't walk away mid-soak. The baths go in stages. Hot room, warm room, cold plunge, then oiling up like a gladiator on his wedding day. And for a brief, shining moment, you're clean. Your skin glows. You smell like basil and ambition. And then you walk outside, step in a puddle of mystery liquid, and it's all over. Most days, you don't bother. Instead, you practice the fine Roman art of looking clean, fresh-ish tunic, a spritz of rose water if you can afford it, maybe a flower behind the ear if you're feeling flirty, and if someone comments on the smell, you tell them it's an imported musk. Very expensive, very trendy, only mildly untrue. But the social judgment is always lurking. That fish vendor? He smells like his wares and knows it, but he still gives you side-eye if your hair looks particularly crunchy. The baker's apprentice once held his breath as you passed, which was rude, considering he's covered in soot and lives in a room with zero airflow. It's a delicate balance. Smell bad enough to blend in, not bad enough to be shamed at the market. Still, there's a strange solidarity in the stink. You nod at others with oil-shiny foreheads and slightly wilted tunics. You exchange tips. Bay leaves help. Try vinegar behind the ears. Don't stand downwind from the tanner's cart. You laugh about it. You shrug. Because tomorrow will be just as hot, just as crowded, and just as fragrantly awful. And at the end of the day, when you lie down on your slightly damp bedding and listen to your neighbors snore through the walls, you remind yourself, at least you tried. You made an effort. You smeared some herbs on your neck, you avoided the worst of the fish juice puddles, and you didn't catch fire. That's hygiene in the Subura. Not perfection, just progress. Finally, you crawl into bed. Your straw mattress pokes you lovingly. Your neighbors laugh, argue, and snore through the walls. Somewhere, a cat is howling at the moon, but you're too tired to care. Tomorrow's another day in the Roman Insula. Sleep in ancient Rome isn't a luxury. It's a ceasefire. A temporary truce between you and the constant chaos of your crumbling, overcrowded tenement. You don't drift off peacefully like in a scented modern commercial. You collapse. You surrender. You let the lice have their moment. Your bed isn't really a bed. It's a pile of straw on a low wooden frame that's already missing one leg and leans at a suggestive angle. You've stuffed a few spare tunics under one side, to make it less slanty. It's not soft, but it's yours. You know each lump, each poke, each squeaky board like an old frenemy. It smells faintly of sweat, smoke, and regret just like home. As you lie there, you do a quick check for bugs. Not out of paranoia, just routine. The straw is always lively. You've tried drying it in the sun, sprinkling it with herbs, even shouting at it. Nothing works. The lice have unionized. They know this is their turf. And by now, you've accepted their presence like an unwanted cousin who won't move out. You scratch, adjust your tunic, and promise to do a vinegar rinse, eventually. Outside, the city hums. Rome never truly sleeps. Somewhere in the Subura, a dog is barking at a shoe. A drunk is singing about love and cheese. A street vendor is shouting in his sleep, trying to sell imaginary lentils. The sound of sandals on cobblestone drifts up like a heartbeat. You hear someone sneeze, someone giggle, someone yell, "Not again, Marcus," followed by the crash of pottery. Inside, your walls join the cash and pottery. Performance. They groan with the weight of 100 lives stacked on top of each other. The upstairs neighbor drops something heavy. You don't even flinch anymore. The floorboards shift with every step someone takes above you. The couple next door is arguing again something about goats, or socks, or a goat wearing socks. You can't tell, and frankly, you don't need to. But the strangest part? It's comforting. Because all that noise, all that life, it means you're not alone. It means the building hasn't collapsed. It means Claudia the chicken hasn't been turned into stew. Yet. It means tomorrow will come, just like it did today, full of burnt lentils, shared gossip, and water jugs that leak just enough to make you question your life choices. You curl up tighter. The blanket you use is a patched piece of old linen, slightly too small, definitely scratchy, but still warm. You pull it up to your chin. It smells like smoke and basil, the familiar scent of survival. In the darkness, your thoughts drift. Did you remember to tie your sandals together so no one steals just one? Did your cousin ever fix that hole in the ceiling? Will the landlord ever appear again? Or is he just a myth like the gods who care? Should you have bought that second loaf of bread, even if it was probably part pigeon? These are the questions that lull you to sleep in ancient Rome. You shift to avoid a particularly aggressive straw poking your back. The mattress squeaks. Someone thumps the wall in response. You thump back, gently. It's a nightly ritual. You don't know who started it, or why, but now it feels rude not to return the signal. Like saying goodnight in a language made of knocks and shared exhaustion. Some nights, you dream of better things. A private latrine. A mattress that doesn't itch. A home with windows that close and neighbors who whisper. But most nights, you dream of little things. A full loaf of fresh bread. A fountain with no line. A moment of silence. Before the rooster screams at 4 a.m., you sigh. One last adjustment, one last scratch. And then, slowly, the chaos softens. The snoring next door blends into the hum of the city. The cat's yowl fades into the wind. Your breathing slows. The lice tuck in. And the mattress, despite all its flaws, wraps around you like a familiar complaint, annoying but somehow reassuring. Tomorrow you'll rise before dawn. You'll fetch water. You'll dodge stew from above. You'll argue about grain prices and step in something that definitely wasn't mud. Again. But that's tomorrow. Tonight, you rest. Lulled by laughter. Wrapped in the warmth of shared misery. Surrounded by noise and life. And the odd sensation that somehow this mess is home. Sleep well, Roman. You've earned it. So tonight, as you lie there in your warm bed with clean sheets, a working toilet, and zero risk of being flattened by a collapsing stairwell, maybe take a moment to appreciate the absurd resilience of your ancient Roman counterparts. They woke up every day to smoky ceilings, sketchy staircases, shared chamber pots, and neighbors who sang badly at dawn. Their floors cracked, their roofs leaked, their food fought back, and their toilets were, well, not really toilets, and somehow they still made it through the day with a shrug and a spoonful of fish sauce. Living in a Roman insula meant mastering the art of survival in a 5-story fire hazard, while also remembering not to stand directly under any windows. Because sometimes life came at you fast, and it was usually in the form of soup. But for all the chaos, noise, smells, and mildly haunted water jugs, they kept going. They raised families, told stories, shared meals, and built one of the most iconic cities in human history, all while dodging rodents and roof tiles. So as you curl up in your peaceful, temperature-controlled space, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to the ancient Romans who survived collapsing buildings, street, filth, communal toilets, and cheese that may or may not have been moving, because history might be uncomfortable, itchy, and occasionally on fire, but it's also proof that people are stubborn, hopeful, and endlessly ridiculous. Sleep well. You've earned it. And at least tonight, your ceiling probably won't collapse. Good night.